The pitchfork nearly pierced her shoulder before Liam Lancaster caught himself mid-thrust, his heart hammering against his ribs as he stared down at the intruder in his barn. She was curled on her side in the hay, green skin, almost luminous in the dawn light filtering through the gaps in the wooden slats, and clutched against her chest like a child's beloved toy was a loaf of bread that he recognized immediately as belonging to Martha Thornton from 3 farms over. The orc girl's tusks, small and ivory white, were just visible past her slightly parted lips, and even in sleep her face held the gauntness of prolonged hunger. Liam lowered the pitchfork slowly, his breath still coming hard, and took a step back to properly assess what he had found. She could not have been more than 18 or 19 summers, he judged, though he was no expert on orc aging. Her dark hair was matted with bits of straw and dirt, tangled around her pointed ears, and the clothes she wore were little more than rags held together by strips of leather that might once have been a proper belt and tunic. Her feet were bare and cut, crusted with old blood and fresh mud, and even as he watched she shivered in her sleep despite the relative warmth of the morning. The bread she held was half eaten, and crumbs dusted the front of her torn shirt and the hay beneath her. Liam had been a soldier once, 5 years past, and he had killed orcs in the border wars without much thought beyond survival. They had been the enemy then, faceless green monsters who raided human settlements and fought with a savagery that gave children nightmares. But standing here in his own barn, looking down at this starving girl who had risked everything for a stolen loaf of bread, he found he could not summon that same certainty. She looked less like a monster and more like every other desperate refugee he had seen in the war's aftermath, human and otherwise, trying to survive in a world that had no place for them. He could turn her over to the magistrate in the village. That would be the sensible thing, the expected thing. They would lock her up or drive her off or worse, and his neighbors would clap him on the back and call him a good man for protecting the community. Or he could wake her and send her on her way with a warning, wash his hands of the whole situation. Or, and this was the thought that made him set the pitchfork aside entirely and rub his face with both hands, he could let her sleep a while longer and figure out what in all the hells he was actually going to do about this. The decision was taken from him when the orc girl's eyes snapped open, and in one fluid motion, she was on her feet with the bread still clutched to her chest and her back pressed against the far wall of the stall. Her eyes were amber, bright and wild like a cornered animal, and they darted from Liam to the pitchfork to the barn door and back again, calculating distances and escape routes. She was taller than he had thought, nearly matching his own height of 6 feet, and despite her thinness there was a coiled strength in her frame that reminded him she could be dangerous if she chose to be. "Easy," Liam said, raising both hands to show they were empty. "I am not going to hurt you." She did not respond, just watched him with those unblinking amber eyes, and he noticed her grip on the bread had tightened until her knuckles showed pale green through her skin. She was terrified, he realized. Not angry or defiant, just absolutely terrified. "Are you hurt?" He tried again, keeping his voice low and calm the way he might with a spooked horse. "You can leave if you want. I will not stop you." Still nothing. He wondered if she even spoke the human tongue or if the terror had simply struck her mute. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she said, "You are lying." Her voice was rough, probably from disuse and thirst, but the words were clear enough. Liam felt something ease in his chest knowing they could at least communicate. "I am not lying," he said. "Look, you are already on your feet. The door is right there. I am not standing in your way." She glanced at the barn door, then back at him, suspicion written across every line of her face. "Humans do not let orcs go. You will call the others. They will hunt me." "I will not call anyone." He took a small step backward, deliberately creating more distance between them. "You are on my land, and what happens here is my business alone. I am not going to turn you in for stealing bread." "Why not?" The question came sharp and fast, like she was trying to catch him in his lie. "Your kind hates mine." Liam considered that because she was not wrong. "Maybe," he admitted, "but I have seen enough hate and killing for one lifetime. I have no interest in adding to it over a loaf of bread." He gestured toward the loaf still pressed against her chest. "You should finish eating that, by the way. You look half-starved." She looked down at the bread as if she had forgotten she was holding it, then back up at him with that same wary confusion. "What do you want, right now?" "I want to feed my chickens and check on my cow, who is probably wondering why I am standing in her barn having a conversation instead of milking her." He paused, then added carefully, "After that, I am going to go inside and make breakfast. If you are still here when I come back out, I will bring you some. If you are gone, well, I hope you make it to wherever you are going safely." He did not wait for her response, just turned and walked out of the barn with deliberate casualness, though every instinct screamed at him that turning his back on an orc was foolish. He made it to the chicken coop before he allowed himself to breathe properly again. And then he stood there for a long moment with his hands braced on the fence rail, wondering what in the name of all the gods he thought he was doing. The farm was small, just 20 acres that he had bought with his mustering out pay and the coins he had saved during his years of service. The house was smaller still, a 2-room cabin with a stone fireplace and a loft for sleeping, but it was his, and he had built most of it with his own hands. He had neighbors within shouting distance, the Thorntons to the east and the Greaves family to the west, and the village of Millbrook was an hour's walk down the road. It was a quiet life, a peaceful life, and he had worked hard to keep it that way after the chaos of war. Harboring an orc, even accidentally, even temporarily, could destroy all of that. He should have woken the magistrate when he found her. He should have roused the neighbors and dealt with the situation the way any sensible person would. Instead, he was out here scattering feed for chickens and trying to figure out how to explain his sudden interest in charity to a creature most folk would kill on sight. When he finally worked up the nerve to return to the barn, he found it empty. The indentation in the hay where she had slept was still there, and a few more bread crumbs, but the orc girl herself had vanished. Liam told himself the feeling in his chest was relief, not disappointment, and went about his morning chores with determined focus. He milked the cow, collected eggs, repaired a section of fence that had been wobbling, and tried very hard not to think about amber eyes and small tusks and the desperate way she had clutched that bread. He was splitting firewood behind the house when he saw her again. Just a flash of green between the trees at the edge of his property. There and gone so quickly he might have imagined it. But he knew he had not imagined it, and when he looked again an hour later while hauling water from the well, she was there again in a different spot, watching him from the cover of the forest. She stayed at the tree line for 3 days, a ghost at the edge of his vision. He never approached her, never acknowledged her presence directly, but he started leaving things out. A bucket of clean water by the barn, a bundle of old clothes that no longer fit him, half a loaf of bread wrapped in cloth on the fence post. The items always disappeared during the night, and he never saw her take them, but he knew it was her. On the 4th day, he woke to find her sitting on his porch steps. Liam nearly dropped the kettle he had been carrying to the well, catching it at the last second and sloshing water over his boots. The orc girl watched this performance without expression, though he thought he saw the corner of her mouth twitch slightly. She was wearing the clothes he had left out, a shirt that hung loose on her frame and trousers that she had belted with rope, and her hair had been pulled back into a rough braid. She still looked too thin, but the desperate, hunted look had eased somewhat from her eyes. "Morning," Liam managed once he had recovered his composure. "Are you hungry?" She nodded once, a sharp jerk of her chin. "All right then. Wait there." He went inside and fried up eggs and bacon, sliced bread and spread it with butter, and brought it all out on 2 plates because eating alone while she watched seemed too cruel. He sat on the steps beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them, and handed her one of the plates. She took it slowly, like she expected it to be a trick, but once she started eating she did so with single-minded intensity that spoke to weeks of hunger. Liam ate his own breakfast at a more measured pace and tried not to stare. When she had finished, scraping the last of the egg from the plate with her finger, she set it down and said, "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Feeding me. Leaving things out, not calling the humans to kill me." "They are called people," Liam said mildly. "And you are also people before you point that out. I am feeding you because you were starving. I left things out because you needed them. I did not call anyone because, as I said before, I am tired of killing. I am orc. I noticed." She turned to look at him directly for the first time, and he was struck again by the brightness of her eyes. "You fought in the war, I can tell. You move like a soldier." "I did," he admitted, "for 6 years. Then I decided I wanted to grow things instead of destroying them, so I came here." "Did you kill orcs?" The question was asked flatly, without emotion, but Liam felt the weight of it anyway. "Yes," he said, because she deserved the truth. "I did what I was ordered to do, and I survived. I am not proud of it, but I will not lie about it either." She was quiet for a long moment, digesting this. Then she said, "I am Cora." "Liam," he replied, and felt something shift between them, some small easing of the tension. "How long have you been on your own, Cora?" 2 months. "Maybe more, I lost count of the days." "Where is your clan?" Her expression shuddered immediately, closing off, and Liam knew he had stepped on something painful. "Gone," she said shortly. "I have no clan." He did not press, just nodded and collected their plates. "Well, you are welcome to stay in the barn if you need a safe place to rest." "I will not bother you." "Why?" she asked again, and there was almost desperation in the question now. "Why would you let an orc stay on your land? If your neighbors find out, they will turn on you." "Then I suppose we will have to make sure they do not find out," Liam said. He stood and brushed hay from his trousers. "I have work to do. There is more food in the house if you need it, and the well water is clean." He left her sitting on the steps and went to work in his vegetable garden. And if he was hyper-aware of her presence the entire time, watching him from various vantage points around the farm, he did his best to pretend otherwise. By evening she had retreated back to the barn, and by the next morning she was gone again. But the morning after that, she was back. It became a pattern over the following weeks. She would disappear for a day or two, vanishing into the forest without a word, and then she would return and haunt the edges of his property like a wary cat deciding whether to trust the hand that fed it. Gradually, so gradually Liam barely noticed it happening, she came closer. She started helping with small tasks, hauling water or collecting eggs, never asking permission and never speaking much, but her presence became a constant fixture of his days. She was there on the morning a wheel broke on his cart, and she lifted the entire thing with a casual display of orc strength that made Liam grateful she had decided not to kill him that first day in the barn. She was there when a summer storm rolled in, helping him secure the animals and repair a section of roof that had started leaking. She was there in the garden, pulling weeds with a methodical precision that suggested she had done farm work before, though she never spoke of her past. The neighbors noticed eventually, because of course they did. Martha Thornton came by one afternoon with a basket of preserves and a keen eye that swept over the farm like she was taking inventory. "Heard you have helped these days," she said without preamble, her gaze landing on Cora, who was forking hay in the barn. "Hired a hand," Liam said casually, his heart in his throat. "Needed the extra pair of hands for the harvest." "That is not a human girl," Martha said, her voice dropping low. "No, she is not. Liam, boy, do you understand what you are doing? That is an orc. They are dangerous, treacherous. She could slit your throat in your sleep." "She could," Liam agreed. "But then again, so could you, Martha, and I do not lose sleep worrying about it." The older woman's mouth pinched with disapproval. "This is not a jest. The magistrate would not look kindly on this. There are laws about harboring enemy creatures." "The war is over," Liam said, and his voice came out harder than he intended. "Has been for 5 years. And she has not done anything wrong except be hungry and desperate. I am not turning her out because of what she is." Martha stared at him for a long moment, then shook her head slowly. "You always were stubborn. Your father was the same way. I hope you know what you are doing, because if this goes wrong, it will not just be you who pays the price." She left, and Liam stood there gripping the basket of preserves so hard he felt the wicker creak. When he finally went to the barn, he found Cora standing rigid beside the hay bales, her face carefully blank. "You heard that," he said. "It was not a question. I should go. I am causing trouble for you. You are not going anywhere." The words came out more vehement than he intended, and Cora's eyes widened slightly. "I mean, unless you want to leave. But do not go because of Martha Thornton and her opinions. She means well, but she does not get to decide who stays on my land. Why do you defend me?" Cora asked, and there was real confusion in her voice now. "You owe me nothing. I am nothing to you." Liam looked at her, this orc girl who had appeared in his barn half dead from starvation, and who had somehow become part of the fabric of his daily life, and tried to find the words for something he did not entirely understand himself. "You are not nothing," he said finally. "You work hard, you do not complain, and you have not slit my throat in my sleep despite ample opportunity. That makes you better company than half the people I knew in the army." She smiled then, just a small quirk of her lips, but it transformed her entire face. "Your standards are very low, Liam Lancaster." "Probably," he admitted, and found himself smiling back. "But I stand by my statement." After Martha's visit, Cora seemed to settle in more fully. She moved from sleeping in the barn to accepting Liam's offer of the loft in the cabin, and she started joining him for meals instead of eating separately. They developed an easy rhythm of work and conversation, and Liam found himself looking forward to the sound of her footsteps in the morning and the way she hummed tunelessly while working in the garden. She never spoke of her past, and he did not push, but piece by piece he assembled a picture of someone who had lost everything and was trying to figure out how to build a new life from the ruins. Summer deepened into high heat, and the crops came in thick and healthy. They worked side by side in the fields, and Liam tried not to notice the way the sun brought out the darker jade tones in Cora's skin, or the way her laughter, rare as it was, made something warm unfurl in his chest. This was a business arrangement, he told himself. She worked, he provided food and shelter, and that was all it was. He was lying to himself, and he knew it, but acknowledging the truth felt too dangerous. The trouble came, as he had known it eventually would, on a sweltering afternoon in late summer. Liam was in the village selling produce when he overheard a group of men talking outside the tavern. He recognized 2 of them as the Greaves brothers from the neighboring farm, and the others were familiar faces from around Millbrook. "Unnatural is what it is," one of the Greaves brothers was saying. Having one of those creatures living right next door makes decent folk nervous. Maybe he is keeping it as a slave, another man suggested. Orcs are strong, could get good work out of one if you kept it in line. Or maybe he is doing something worse. This was accompanied by ugly laughter. You know how soldiers get during war, develop strange tastes. Liam's vision tunneled, rage white-hot in his veins, and he found himself walking toward them before conscious thought caught up. "Say that again," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I want to make sure I heard you correctly." The men turned, and the Greaves brother who had been speaking had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Now, Liam, we did not mean anything by it. We are just concerned neighbors. Concerned." Liam tested the word. "You are standing here making vile insinuations about me and about a girl who has done nothing to any of you, and you call that concern." "She is not a girl, she is an orc," one of the other men said, "and you are breaking the law harboring her. The magistrate should know." "Then tell him." Liam stepped closer, and the man backed up despite himself. "Go ahead. Run to the magistrate and tell him that a veteran who served 6 years in the border wars has hired an orc to help with his farm. Tell him she works hard, causes no trouble, and that the only people who have a problem with it are a bunch of busybodies with nothing better to do than gossip outside a tavern." "It is not right," the Greaves brother insisted. "It is not natural. What if it turns on you? What if it attacks someone?" "Her name is Cora," Liam said through clenched teeth, "and she has more honor than the lot of you combined. Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do." He left before he did something stupid like throw a punch, but his hands were shaking with residual anger the entire walk home. Cora was in the garden when he arrived, and she took one look at his face and straightened. "What happened?" he told her, editing out the worst of the comments, but she was perceptive enough to fill in the gaps. Her expression went carefully neutral in a way he had learned meant she was hiding hurt or anger. "They are right," she said quietly. "I am putting you in danger. I should leave." "Absolutely not." Liam dropped his pack of supplies and walked to where she stood among the bean plants. "Do not let their ignorance dictate your choices. This is my farm, and you are welcome here for as long as you want to stay. But if the magistrate comes, then we will deal with that when it happens, but I am not throwing you out to appease a bunch of small-minded fools." Cora looked up at him, and there was something raw and vulnerable in her amber eyes. "Why?" she asked, not for the first time. "Why do you keep defending me? Why do you care what happens to me?" "Because I cannot imagine this place without you anymore," Liam thought. "Because you have become the best part of my days, and the thought of you leaving feels like losing something essential. Because somewhere in the past few months, I stopped seeing you as an orc and started seeing you as just Cora, and I am half in love with you even though I know I should not be." He did not say any of that. Instead he said, "Because it is the right thing to do. Because you deserve better than to be hunted and afraid. Because you are my friend and I protect my friends." Something flickered across her face, too quick to identify, and then she nodded and turned back to the garden. But that evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the fields, she reached over and briefly squeezed his hand, and Liam felt that small gesture of trust and affection like a brand. The magistrate came 3 days later. Liam saw the official horse and rider coming up the road and felt his stomach sink. Beside him, Cora tensed like she was preparing to run, and he put a hand on her arm without thinking. "Wait," he said. "Let me handle this." The magistrate was a lean man named Roland Shepherd, career bureaucrat with a permanent expression of mild irritation. He dismounted and approached with the sort of officious precision that suggested this was not a social call. "Liam Lancaster?" he asked, though he obviously knew the answer. "That would be me. What can I do for you, magistrate?" I have received complaints about an orc residing on your property. Specifically, concerns that you are harboring an enemy combatant in violation of the settlement laws." His gaze slid to Cora, and his expression soured. "I take it this is the creature in question." "This is Cora," Liam said evenly. "She works for me. She is not a combatant, enemy or otherwise. The war has been over for 5 years. The law is quite clear about the restrictions on orc movement within human territories. They are permitted in designated zones only, and this area is not one of them. That is a stupid law designed to make refugees into criminals," Liam said bluntly, "and I am not going to enforce it on my own land." Magistrate Shepard's eyebrows rose. "You understand you are admitting to breaking the law. I understand I am refusing to throw an innocent person off my property because some neighbors have nothing better to do than make trouble. She is not a person under the law, Lancaster. She is an orc. The distinction matters." The magistrate pulled out a rolled document. "I have the authority to remove her by force if necessary, and to fine you substantially for the violation. However, given your service record, I am willing to be lenient. Send the orc away peacefully, pay a reduced fine, and we will consider the matter closed." Liam felt Cora's arm tense under his hand, felt her preparing to accept the inevitable, and something fierce and protective surged up in him. "No," he said. "No. You heard me. No. I will not send her away. I will not pay your fine, and if you try to remove her by force, you will find it significantly more difficult than you are anticipating." The magistrate's expression hardened. "Are you threatening an officer of the law?" "I am telling you that I fought for 6 years to protect people's right to live in peace, and I am not going to stand by while you persecute someone for the crime of existing while orc." Liam took a step forward. "Cora has broken no laws. She has harmed no one. She works, she contributes, and she has as much right to be here as anyone. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with the regional governor, but until someone higher up the chain tells me otherwise, she stays." For a long moment, the magistrate simply stared at him. Then he rolled the document back up with a sharp snap. "You are making a serious mistake, Lancaster. This will not end well for you." "Maybe," Liam said, "but at least I will be able to look at myself in the mirror." The magistrate remounted his horse with stiff dignity. "You have until the end of the week to reconsider. After that, I will return with enforcement officers, and the consequences will be considerably more severe." He rode off, and Liam stood there watching until he disappeared down the road. Only then did he allow himself to acknowledge the way his heart was hammering, and his hands were shaking slightly. He had just committed himself to defying the law, to potentially losing everything he had built, and he was not entirely sure what he thought he was going to accomplish except buying a little more time. "You should not have done that," Cora said quietly behind him. "He is right. This will not end well." Liam turned to face her. "What was I supposed to do? Just let him take you?" "Yes. That is what any sane person would do. I am not worth losing your farm, your livelihood, everything you have built." She gestured around at the land. "This is your home, Liam. Do not throw it away for me." "This is your home too," he said, and realized as he said it that it was true. Somewhere in the past months, she had stopped being a temporary guest and started being an essential part of this place. "And I am not giving it up without a fight." "Why?" she demanded, and there was anguish in her voice now. "Why are you doing this? I do not understand. I am just an orc. I am nothing special. Why would you risk everything for me?" "Because you are not nothing," Liam said. He reached out and gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You are strong and brave and kind, and you have survived things that would break most people. You make me laugh. You make this place feel less lonely. You are," he stopped, the words catching in his throat, because to say them out loud would change everything. "I am what?" she whispered. "You are everything," he said, helpless to stop the confession now that it had started. "You are the first thing I think about in the morning and the last thing I think about at night. You have become so important to me that I cannot imagine my life without you in it. So no, I am not going to let some magistrate take you away because of a stupid law and stupider prejudice. I am going to fight for you, for us, for the right to choose who I care about." Cora stared at him with wide eyes, and for a terrible moment he thought he had miscalculated, had revealed too much and frightened her away. Then she whispered, "Us. If you want there to be an us," Liam said. "If you feel even a fraction of what I feel. If I have not completely imagined this thing between us." She kissed him. It was clumsy and hesitant, her tusks making the angle slightly awkward, but it was also the sweetest thing Liam had ever experienced. He pulled her closer, careful and reverent, and felt her arms come up around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cora pressed her forehead against his. "I thought I was imagining it," she said. "I thought you were just being kind, that you could never see me as anything but an orc you felt sorry for." "I do not feel sorry for you," Liam said. "I feel awed by you. I feel grateful every day that you chose to stay. I feel," he laughed breathlessly, "I feel like the luckiest man alive, and also completely terrified because I have no idea how we are going to make this work." "We will figure it out," Cora said, and there was a fierce determination in her voice. "Together." They spent the rest of the evening planning, trying to figure out a strategy that did not end with Liam losing his farm or Cora being forcibly removed. The options were limited. They could run, disappear into the frontier and start over somewhere the law had less reach, but that would mean abandoning everything Liam had worked for. They could fight, try to hold off the magistrate's enforcement officers, but that would almost certainly end in bloodshed and make them fugitives. Or they could try to find some legal loophole, some way to make Cora's presence here legitimate in the eyes of the law. It was this last option that led Liam to make the long ride to Millbrook the next morning, leaving Cora with strict instructions to stay out of sight. He went to see the village clerk, a bookish young man named Peter who owed Liam a favor from the previous winter when Liam had helped repair his family's barn after a storm. "I need to know about the settlement laws," Liam said without preamble. "Specifically the restrictions on orcs and what exceptions might exist." Peter pushed his spectacles up his nose and looked uncomfortable. "I heard about your situation. The magistrate was not quiet about it." "I am sure he was not. Can you help me or not?" The clerk sighed and pulled out a thick book of legal codes. "The restrictions are pretty comprehensive. Orcs are only permitted in human territories under a few specific circumstances, designated work zones with special permits, prisoners under guard." Or he paused, frowning at a particular passage, "or as family members of human citizens." Liam felt something click in his mind. Family members. It is an old provision, probably meant for children of mixed marriages or adoptions, but yes. Immediate family members are exempt from the movement restrictions. Peter looked up. "But that would not help your situation unless," his eyes widened. Oh, you cannot be serious." "Why not?" Liam asked, already turning the idea over in his mind. "If we were married, Cora would be exempt from the law. The magistrate would have no grounds to remove her." "Liam, setting aside the enormous social complications of a human marrying an orc, you realize what you would be signing up for. The prejudice, the isolation, potentially violence from people who see it as an abomination. Not to mention you have known this girl for what, a few months. That is not enough time to make a decision like marriage." "I know," Liam said. "Believe me, I understand how insane this sounds." But I am out of options, Peter. The magistrate is coming back in a few days with officers to forcibly remove her, and I cannot let that happen. If marriage is the only legal way to keep her safe, then that is what I am going to do." "Have you asked her?" Peter said. "Because proposing marriage to avoid deportation is possibly the least romantic thing I have ever heard, and I do not think that is going to go over well." Liam had not thought that far ahead, and now that Peter mentioned it, he realized he had no idea how Cora would react. They had only just acknowledged their feelings for each other the night before. Asking her to marry him now, for purely legal reasons, seemed like a terrible idea, and also the only idea he had. He rode home in a daze, trying to figure out how to broach the subject, but when he arrived he found Cora pacing anxiously in the yard. She ran to him before he had even dismounted. "You were gone so long, I thought something had happened." "I am fine," he assured her, swinging down from the horse. "I was doing research. I think I found a way to solve our problem, but you are not going to like it." He explained about the family exemption and the legal protections marriage would provide, and watched as Cora's expression went from confused to comprehending to something he could not quite read. "You want to marry me," she said slowly, "to protect me from the law." "Yes. I mean, not just for that reason. I care about you, you know that. But yes, the practical reason is that it would make you legally protected as my family." Liam ran a hand through his hair, feeling completely out of his depth. "I know this is not how anyone imagines a marriage proposal. I know it is crazy and rushed and probably doomed to fail spectacularly. But I am out of better ideas, and I am not willing to lose you." Cora was quiet for a long time, staring at the ground. When she finally looked up, there were tears tracking down her green cheeks. "My clan cast me out," she said, her voice rough with emotion. 2 months before I found your barn, they said I was too soft, too sympathetic to humans. There was a raid and I refused to participate. I tried to warn a human family and I was seen. The elders said I was a traitor to my blood and they exiled me. I have been alone since then, hunted by both sides, belonging nowhere." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "You are the first person, human or orc, who has treated me like I matter, who has seen me as more than just what I am. And yes, I know this is insane. I know marriage is not something you should rush into, but I also know that I do not want to leave here. I do not want to leave you. So if you are truly offering, if this is really what you want, then yes, I will marry you." Relief and terror and joy all crashed through Liam at once, and he pulled Cora into his arms, holding her tight. "I want this," he said against her hair. "I want you. We will make it work somehow." They married 3 days later, before the magistrate could return with his enforcement officers. Peter agreed to officiate, as he was licensed to perform civil ceremonies, and he brought along his sister as a witness. It was the strangest wedding any of them had ever been part of, held in Liam's small cabin with only 4 people present, and not a flower or fancy dress in sight. Cora wore the same work clothes she wore every day, and Liam had not even thought to get rings until Peter's sister offered to lend them her grandmother's bands. But when Liam took Cora's hands and made his vows, looking into her amber eyes and seeing his whole future there, it felt more real and meaningful than any elaborate ceremony could have been. He promised to honor her, to protect her, to stand by her side against whatever came. And when she made her vows in return, her voice steady and sure, promising to love him and build a life with him, he felt something settle in his chest that he had not even realized was unsettled. Peter pronounced them married, recorded the union in his official ledger, and gave them copies of the marriage certificate with a look that suggested he thought they were both insane, but wished them well anyway. His sister hugged Cora, which seemed to startle her, and told Liam he was a brave man and she hoped it all worked out. Then they left, and Liam and Cora were alone, married and facing the consequences of what they had just done. "Well," Liam said, feeling suddenly awkward. "That happened." "It did." Cora looked down at the unfamiliar ring on her finger. "Are you going to regret this?" "No," Liam said immediately. "Are you? Ask me again after the magistrate tries to arrest us both for fraud or perversion or whatever charge he invents." But she was smiling slightly, and when Liam reached for her hand, she laced her fingers through his. They did not have to wait long. Magistrate Shepherd arrived the next afternoon with 2 enforcement officers, both armed and looking prepared for trouble. Liam met them in the yard with Cora at his side, and the marriage certificate in his pocket felt like both a shield and a weapon. "I gave you a chance to do this peacefully," the magistrate said without preamble. "Now you will both need to come with me. The orc for deportation and you for prosecution under the harboring laws." "My wife is not going anywhere," Liam said calmly. "And neither am I." Shepherd's face went red. "You're what?" Liam pulled out the certificate and held it up. "My wife, Cora Lancaster. We were married 3 days ago in a legal ceremony performed by your own village clerk. As my spouse, she is exempt from the movement restrictions under the family member provision of the settlement laws. You can check with Peter if you do not believe me." The magistrate snatched the certificate and read it, his expression growing darker with each line. "This is fraud," he said finally. "A sham marriage designed to circumvent the law. I will have it annulled." "On what grounds?" Liam asked. "We were married by a licensed official. We are both of legal age and sound mind. The marriage was consummated." That last part was a lie, as they had both been too nervous and exhausted to do anything but sleep the previous night, but the magistrate did not need to know that. "You can object all you want, but the law is clear. Cora is my legal family, and she has every right to be here." Shepherd looked like he wanted to argue further, but one of the enforcement officers leaned in and murmured something in his ear. The magistrate's jaw worked, and then he thrust the certificate back at Liam with barely controlled violence. "This is not over," he said. "I will be investigating this marriage thoroughly, and if I find any evidence of fraud, you will both face the consequences." "Investigate all you want," Liam said. "We have nothing to hide." The magistrate and his officers left, and Liam and Cora stood in the yard watching them go. When they were finally out of sight, Cora let out a shaky breath. "That was terrifying." "That was a victory," Liam corrected. "He left without arresting either of us, which means the marriage gambit worked. You are legally protected now." "For how long?" "He said he would investigate. What if he finds a way to invalidate the marriage? Then we will deal with that when it happens. But for now, we won." Liam turned to face her and found her looking at him with an expression he could not quite decipher. "What? You called me your wife. You told him the marriage was consummated. You claimed me in front of witnesses." Her voice was soft. "This is real now. We are really married." "We are," Liam agreed. "Are you all right with that?" Instead of answering, Cora kissed him, and this time there was nothing hesitant about it. Liam pulled her closer, his hand settling at her waist, and kissed her back with all the relief and fear and love churning through him. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers and whispered, "I meant every word of my vows, you know. This might have started as a legal maneuver, but that is not all it is. Not to me." "Not to me either," Cora said. "I love you, Liam Lancaster. I think I have been falling in love with you since that first morning when you gave me breakfast and did not demand anything in return." "I love you too," he said, and felt the truth of it in his bones. "We are going to make this work. I do not care what anyone else thinks." The following weeks tested that resolve thoroughly. Word of the marriage spread through the village and neighboring farms with the speed of wildfire, and the reactions ranged from scandalized disapproval to outright hostility. Martha Thornton stopped speaking to Liam entirely. The Greaves brothers made a formal complaint to the regional governor. Several people Liam had considered friends crossed the street to avoid him in town, but there were surprises too. Peter the clerk defended them publicly, citing the legality of the marriage and telling anyone who would listen that Liam Lancaster was a good man who deserved to be left in peace. A few other veterans from the war, men who understood the complexity of what they had fought for and against, came by the farm to offer awkward congratulations and support. And one morning, Liam found a basket of bread and preserves on his porch with a note that said simply, "Be happy. You deserve it." He suspected it was from Peter's sister, though she never confirmed it. Through it all, Liam and Cora clung to each other and to the life they were building together. They worked the farm, harvested the autumn crops, and began preparing for winter. They learned how to navigate married life, how to share space and make decisions together and argue without it becoming destructive. It was not always easy. There were days when the weight of social pressure and isolation felt crushing, when Cora suggested maybe she should leave after all, just to give Liam a chance at a normal life. And there were days when Liam struggled with his own anger at a world that could not accept what they had, that saw their love as something wrong or unnatural. But there were good days too. Days when they worked side by side in comfortable silence and ended the evening laughing over dinner. Days when Cora sang old Orc ballads while cooking, her rough voice strangely beautiful, and Liam found himself falling more in love with her. Days when they curled up together by the fire and talked about their dreams for the future, tentative and hopeful plans for expanding the farm or maybe starting a family someday. If they could find a way to make the world safe enough for a child who would belong to both their peoples. Winter came early and hard that year, blanketing the farm in snow and forcing them to spend long stretches confined to the cabin. It was during one of those snowbound weeks that Cora finally told Liam the full story of her exile from her clan. They were lying in bed, the wind howling outside and the fire crackling low in the hearth, and she spoke into the darkness about the raid she had refused to join, the human family she had warned, and the way her own people had turned on her for that single act of mercy. "I do not regret it," she said quietly. "I would make the same choice again, but it hurt, losing everyone I knew, being cast out from the only home I had ever had. For a long time I wished I had just kept quiet, had followed orders like everyone else. It would have been easier." "But it would not have been you," Liam said, pulling her closer. "You did the right thing even though it cost you everything. That takes incredible courage." "Or incredible stupidity," she said, but there was a smile in her voice. "My mother always said I thought too much and felt too much for an orc. She said it would get me killed one day." "I am very glad it did not," Liam said. "I am very glad you chose mercy. Otherwise you never would have ended up in my barn and I never would have met the love of my life." Cora was quiet for a moment, then said, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not found me? If I had stolen from someone else who turned me in, or if I had just died in the woods somewhere?" "Every day," Liam admitted. "And every day I am grateful that is not what happened." "We found each other, Cora. Against all odds and logic, we found each other. That has to mean something." "It means everything," she whispered and kissed him. They made love that night, slowly and carefully, learning each other in the firelight. Cora was nervous, her body tense at first, and Liam took his time, patient and attentive, making sure she felt safe and wanted. When they finally came together, it felt like a promise being kept, like all the words they had spoken sealing into something permanent and real. Afterward, lying tangled together with Cora's head on his chest and her breathing deep and even, Liam thought that maybe, despite everything, they were going to be all right. Spring arrived eventually, thawing the frozen ground and bringing new life to the farm. Liam and Cora planted the fields together, expanding the garden and adding a new section for herbs that Cora remembered from her childhood. The crops from the previous year had been good, despite the chaos, and they had enough saved to make some improvements. They repaired the barn, added a proper chicken coop, and talked about maybe getting a second cow. The social isolation continued, but it bothered them less as time went on. They had each other, and that proved to be enough most days. A few brave souls began cautiously accepting them, people who valued Liam's friendship or Cora's hard work more than they feared social censure. Peter and his sister visited occasionally, bringing news from the village and a welcome connection to the outside world. And one memorable afternoon, a traveling merchant stopped by and spent 2 hours talking with Cora in the Orcish tongue, the first time she had spoken her native language in over a year. She cried after he left, but she said they were good tears, tears of relief and gratitude. It was early summer, nearly a year after Liam had first found Cora in the barn when the next crisis arrived. A group of orc refugees appeared at the farm one evening, 5 adults and 3 children, all exhausted and desperate. They had heard rumors, they said, of an orc woman living safely on a human farm, and they had come seeking help or at least information on how she had managed it. Cora and Liam looked at each other, communicating silently the way they had learned to do, and then Liam nodded. They brought the refugees into the barn, fed them from their own supplies, and listened to their stories. They were from different clans, all displaced by the aftermath of the war, trying to find somewhere they could exist without being hunted or starved or worse. When they heard that Cora had married a human to gain legal protection, they looked at each other with a mixture of hope and calculation. "Could we do the same?" one of the women asked. "Find human partners, marry them, claim the family exemption." "It would have to be real," Cora said carefully. "The magistrate already suspects our marriage is fraud. If a flood of sudden marriages happened, they would never accept it. You would need to find people who truly wanted to marry you, who were willing to face all the consequences that come with it. And where would we find such people?" Another orc asked bitterly. "Humans hate us, they see us as monsters." "Not all humans," Liam said quietly. "I did not. And there are others like me, people who judge individuals rather than entire races. They exist. You just have to be brave enough to look for them and patient enough to let trust build." The refugees stayed for 3 days, resting and regaining their strength. And in that time, Cora and Liam helped them as much as they could. They shared food and clothes, gave advice on which towns might be more tolerant and which to avoid, and sent them off with directions to a settlement near the western frontier where they had heard orcs and humans lived in something approaching peace. It was not much, but it was something. After they left, Cora stood in the yard staring at the road and said, "There are so many more like them. So many people just trying to survive, and the world will not let them." "I know," Liam said, coming to stand beside her. "We cannot save everyone. But we can help where we can, and maybe that is enough." "Is it?" she asked. "Is it enough to just survive and be happy while others suffer?" "We are doing more than surviving," Liam pointed out. "We are living proof that humans and orcs can coexist, can even love each other. That matters. It might not solve everything, but it matters." Cora leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her from behind, holding her close. "I want to do more," she said. "I want to help others find what we found, I just do not know how." The answer came unexpectedly a few weeks later, when Peter rode out to the farm with news. "The regional governor is conducting a review of the settlement laws," he said, barely containing his excitement. "There have been complaints and petitions from various communities, and apparently enough pressure has built that they are willing to reconsider some provisions. They are holding hearings to gather testimony." "What does that have to do with us?" Liam asked, though he was already beginning to suspect. "You two are living proof that the current laws are too harsh. A successful marriage between a human and an orc, productive members of the community, causing no harm. If you testified at the hearing, shared your story, it could influence the outcome. They might ease the restrictions, create more pathways for legal residents." Liam looked at Cora, saw the hope and fear warring in her expression. That would mean going public on a much larger scale. Facing not just local prejudice but regional attention, it could backfire spectacularly. "It could," Peter admitted, "but it could also change things for the better, not just for you two but for all the others in similar situations." They discussed it late into the night, weighing the risks against the potential benefits. It would be difficult and probably unpleasant. They would be opening themselves up to scrutiny and judgment on a scale they had not yet experienced. But they would also have a chance to make a difference, to maybe help create a world where what they had was not seen as scandalous or illegal, but simply as love. In the end, the decision was easy. They had fought so hard for their own right to be together. How could they not fight for others to have the same chance? The hearing was held in the regional capital, a 3-day journey by wagon. Liam and Cora arrived to find the courthouse packed with people, some supportive but many hostile. There were other interracial couples there too, mostly humans married to elves or dwarves, as those unions were more socially accepted. But Liam and Cora were the only human-orc pairing, and they drew stares and whispers everywhere they went. When it was their turn to testify, Cora gripped Liam's hand so hard he lost feeling in his fingers, but her voice was steady as she told their story. She spoke of being exiled, of starving in the woods, of finding unexpected kindness from a human veteran who had every reason to hate her kind. She spoke of building a life together, of marriage and love and the constant struggle against prejudice. And she spoke of the other refugees they had met, the countless people just trying to survive in a world that saw them as less than human. Liam testified too, talking about his years in the war, the orcs he had killed without knowing anything about them as individuals, and how meeting Cora had forced him to confront his own biases. He spoke of the strength of their marriage, the happiness they had found, and the absurdity of laws that would tear apart families based solely on species. He looked directly at the governor's panel and said, "I served this land for 6 years. I bled for it, lost friends for it, and came home to build a life in peace. The fact that my wife is orc should not matter. She is a person, she is my family, and she deserves the same rights and protections as any other citizen." The questions from the panel were tough, sometimes hostile. They probed for evidence of fraud, asked invasive questions about their relationship, and challenged every aspect of their story. But Liam and Cora held firm, answering honestly and refusing to be intimidated. By the time they were dismissed, they were exhausted, but they had said everything they needed to say. The decision came 2 months later, delivered by official letter. The settlement laws would be amended. While restrictions on orc movement would remain in border zones and areas of active conflict, in peaceful regions the requirements would be relaxed. Orcs would be permitted to reside in human territories with proper documentation, and family exemptions would be explicitly broadened to include spouses and children of mixed unions. It was not perfect, not everything they had hoped for, but it was progress. The letter also contained a personal note from one of the panel members, a woman named Helena Garrett, thanking them for their courage in testifying and informing them that their case had been a significant factor in the decision to amend the laws. She wrote, "You have done a great service, not just for yourselves but for countless others who will benefit from these changes. May your love continue to thrive." Cora read the note 3 times, tears streaming down her face, and then she laughed and pulled Liam into a fierce hug. "We did it," she said. "We actually made a difference. We did," Liam agreed, holding her tight. "I am so proud of you, of us." Life did not magically become easier after the law change. They still faced prejudice and hostility from some quarters, and they probably always would. But it mattered that the law was on their side now, that other couples like them would have a clear legal path forward, that refugees like the group they had helped would have more options for finding safety. More immediately, the law change seemed to give permission to those in their community who had been wavering. Slowly, tentatively, people began to accept them more openly. They were invited to a harvest festival that autumn, the first social event they had attended since their marriage. Some people still avoided them, but others made genuine efforts at friendship. The Greaves brothers even came by to grudgingly apologize for their earlier behavior, though Liam suspected that was more about needing Cora's help repairing their barn than actual remorse. Winter came again, their second as a married couple, and they spent it much more comfortably than the first. The farm was thriving. They had enough supplies to see them through the cold months with ease, and they had each other. They talked seriously about starting a family, both excited and terrified by the prospect. There were so many unknowns. Would they even be able to have children together, given their different species? If they could, what would those children be like? How would they be treated by a world that already struggled to accept their parents' marriage? But those were worries for another day. For now, they had this: a warm fire, a full larder, and a love that had proven stronger than prejudice and law and every obstacle thrown in their path. One snowy evening, as they sat together by the fire, Cora said, "Do you remember that first morning, when you found me in the barn? I remember thinking I was about to murder an intruder with a pitchfork, and then realizing you were just a starving girl who needed help," Liam said. "I remember being completely terrified and having no idea what to do. I remember thinking you were going to kill me," Cora said. "I remember being so afraid that I could barely breathe, and then you gave me breakfast and everything changed." "Everything changed," Liam agreed. "The best decision I ever made was lowering that pitchfork. The best decision I ever made was staying," Cora said. She turned to look at him, firelight reflecting in her amber eyes. "Thank you, Liam, for seeing me when everyone else just saw an orc. For loving me when it would have been so much easier not to, for fighting for us. Thank you for letting me," Liam said, "for trusting me, for building this life with me, for being brave enough to stay." He kissed her softly. "I love you, Cora Lancaster. More than I ever thought it was possible to love another person." "I love you too," she said. "Every day more than the day before." They sat together in peaceful silence, and Liam thought about the strange path that had brought them here, a stolen loaf of bread, a decision to show mercy instead of violence, a desperate legal gambit that had become a real and lasting love. So many moments where things could have gone differently, where he could have made another choice, and none of it would have happened. But this was the path they had walked together, and he would not change a single step of it. Not the hardship, not the fear, not the struggle, because it had all led to this moment. To her head on his shoulder and his arm around her waist, and the certain knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced everything else. Together, stubborn, and utterly devoted to each other. Spring came once more, bringing green to the fields and warmth to the air. Cora discovered she was pregnant in early summer, and they spent the months leading up to the birth in a state of anxious excitement. Peter's sister, who had some training as a midwife, agreed to help with the delivery, and several other women from the community cautiously offered their support and advice. It seemed the prospect of a baby, even one of mixed heritage, was enough to soften even some of the hardest hearts. The baby arrived on a warm autumn evening, entering the world with a lusty cry that Liam heard from outside the cabin where he had been banished for the duration of the labor. When Peter's sister finally let him in, he found Cora exhausted but glowing, cradling a tiny bundle in her arms. The baby had Cora's green skin, softened to a lighter shade, and Liam's brown eyes. There were tiny bumps where tusks would eventually grow and delicate pointed ears. "A son," Cora said, looking up at him with tears streaming down her face. "We have a son." Liam knelt beside the bed, reaching out with a trembling hand to touch his child's impossibly soft cheek. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are perfect, both of you." They named him Arden after Liam's father, and he became the center of their world. Raising him was a challenge unlike anything they had faced before. He was a curious, energetic child who seemed to inherit both his mother's strength and his father's stubborn determination. As he grew, they taught him about both his heritages, the human and the orc, trying to give him pride in both parts of himself. The community's reaction to Arden was mixed. Some people accepted him as they had slowly come to accept his parents, seeing him as just a child who deserved a chance at a normal life. Others remained hostile or at best coldly distant, unable or unwilling to accept a child who represented such a thorough mixing of races. But Arden was surprisingly resilient, meeting prejudice with his mother's directness, and his father's determination not to let others' opinions dictate his worth. Years passed, each one adding new layers to their story. The farm continued to thrive. Liam and Cora became known in the region not just as the controversial mixed couple, but as skilled farmers and decent people who helped their neighbors when needed. Other mixed couples began to appear, encouraged by the legal changes and by the example Liam and Cora had set. It was slow progress, halting and sometimes frustratingly incremental, but it was progress nonetheless. Arden grew into a strong, thoughtful young man who inherited the best qualities of both his parents. He talked of becoming a teacher someday, of helping other mixed heritage children find their place in a world that did not always want them. Watching him, Liam felt a pride so fierce it was almost painful. This was what they had fought for, not just the right to love each other, but the right to build a family and a future without apology. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Liam and Cora took a rare day off from farm work and walked together to the spot where he had first found her in the barn. The old structure had been rebuilt over the years, expanded and improved, but they could still point out the exact stall where she had slept with stolen bread clutched to her chest. "I was so afraid that morning," Cora said, staring at the spot. "I thought I had finally run out of options, that this was where my story would end." "Instead, it was where our story began," Liam said, taking her hand. "The best chapter of my life." "Mine too," she said. She turned to face him fully, and he was struck again by how beautiful she was, how much he loved the familiar lines of her face and the way her eyes reflected the light. "I used to think the war took everything from me. My home, my clan, my place in the world. But really it brought me here to you, to this life we have built. I would not change any of it." "Not even the hard parts?" Liam asked. "The prejudice, the legal battles, the years of struggle?" "Not even those," she said firmly. "They made us stronger. They made us certain." and they made it possible for others to follow the path we carved. She smiled. Besides, the hard parts make the good parts sweeter. Liam pulled her close and kissed her, there in the barn where it had all started, and thought about the improbable journey that had brought them from that frightened orc girl and uncertain human man to this. A decade of marriage, a son who was the pride of their lives, a community that had slowly learned to accept them, and a love that had only deepened with time. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and Liam looked at the farm spread out before them, the fields they had planted and tended together, the home they had built, the life they had created against all odds. This was not the life he had imagined when he mustered out of the army 10 years ago. It was better, richer, more meaningful than anything he could have planned. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over their land, with Arden inside studying by lamplight, Cora leaned her head on Liam's shoulder and said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For everything. For seeing me, for choosing me, for building this with me." She reached over and laced her fingers through his, "For being my home." "You are my home too," Liam said. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after. I love you, Cora. I will never stop loving you." "Good," she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Because you are stuck with me now." "Best decision I ever made," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, secure in their love and in the life they had forged together. It had not been easy. There had been moments of doubt and fear, obstacles that seemed insurmountable, and prejudices that sometimes still stung. But they had faced it all together, and they had won not through grand gestures but through the steady daily choice to keep loving and believing in each other. The world was changing, slowly but surely. More mixed couples appeared each year. The laws continued to evolve. Children like Arden grew up knowing they were not alone, that there were others like them carving out spaces in a world learning to expand its definition of family and love. And at the center of it all, in a small farm at the edge of the frontier, were two people who had proven that love could transcend the boundaries of species and prejudice. Liam Lancaster and Cora Lancaster, human and orc, husband and wife, partners in every sense of the word. They had started with a loaf of stolen bread and a moment of unexpected mercy, and they had built from that foundation a love story that would be whispered about for generations. A testament to courage, to hope, and to the transformative power of choosing compassion over fear. As the stars emerged overhead, brilliant in the clear night sky, they remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms and in the certainty that whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they would face them together. Because that was what they did. That was what they had always done, from that first morning in the barn until this moment and beyond. Together, stubborn and devoted, proving with every breath that love, real love, knew no boundaries at all.